Okay, so I'm going to be doing Gutters, Chapter 3, Part 2, because, before I was kind of interrupted. So, I'm just gonna start a little bit before where I stopped. Okay. I'm gonna start now, because Yeet. Peter wrinkles his nose when Denmark pulls the bandana up over his face. It smells like dirt and sweat. How come you don't go on the roads? Isn't that faster? Denmark's hands pause behind his ears and he shakes his head. Yeah, it is. He leans over his bag and tucks out a thin windbreaker and places it over the boy's shoulders, zipping it up to his neck and tucking the edges of the bandana into it. The problem is that there are people out there who never made it into shelters and still managed to survive what happened. People are desperate and they're very, very dangerous. There isn't much for food or supplies left, and a lot of them have given up on scavenging. He stretches the goggles over Peter's head and lets them rest on his forehead. People are turning on each other. A lot of them wait on the main roads for people who are traveling, and if they've got anything of use on them, they'll do whatever it takes to get it. He draws back and lifts up his shirt, exposing a ragged scar along his thin belly. I had a rain poncho. He drops his shirt and goes back to fussing with the windbreaker, which is much too large and hangs around Peter's knees. There are also people who are making other people into resources, if you know what I mean. Peter's eyes widen. They're eating each other? Denmark nods and pulls the hood up over Peter's head. They are. Once he's satisfied that the jacket is secure, he crouches down so that he's at eye level with Peter and reaches out to take his hands into his own. Now listen, he says seriously. I need you to promise me that when we leave, you'll listen to everything I tell you. He jerks his head in the direction of the bunker doors. I've been out here for a long time, and it's really important that you trust me, okay? I know that you can take care of yourself, but you also need to realize how dangerous it is. It's not just the people either. Nature's gotten just as bad. He squeezes Seelan's hands. Do you promise to do what I tell you? Peter stares at him wide-eyed and nods jerkily. I promise. Denmark smiles and pats his knee. Good. He straightens back up and starts to pull his own coat on. I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to know what you're going to be getting into. He begins to wrap the damp sheet from before around his neck and mouth as Peter finished gathering his things. How come we have to cover our faces? He asks. He shakes out his pillowcase and stuffs the contents of his bag into his bag along with a tin of mints and a pair of scissors. Is the air bad? That's part of it. Denmark snaps his goggles on and hauls his bag over one shoulder, his rifle on the other. When the flashes happened, it set all kinds of shit on fire. Landfills, buildings, cars, you name it. It's been on fire. The air is really caustic because of it. It's also because of the ash. If you breathe too much of it, it'll make you sick. And if too much of it gets into your eyes, he taps the left side of his goggles. You'll go blind. And that's another thing. I need you to always walk on my right side, alright? If you're on the left, I won't be able to see you. Okay. He sighs deeply and nods. Anyone here you want to say goodbye to before we go? No. Alright. One last thing before we leave. He reaches around to open the bag around his waist and pulls free a small knife, which he hands to Peter. Once we get going, I'll try to find you something better, but for now, just keep this on you at all times. Did Tino ever teach you how to shoot? Seelan takes the knife and carefully snaps the sheath clasp closed around his belt loop. Sort of. He showed me how to hold a gun, but I'm not very good at it. Denmark nods. That's a start. When we stop at night, I'll show you. I don't have enough bullets for you to actually shoot it, but I'll teach you how to load it and fire it right. He reaches his right hand out for Peter to take and starts to pull him toward the bunker doors. Ready? Sealand sets his jaw and holds tightly to the Dane's hand as he starts to spin the handle open. Ready. Try not to inhale, he mutters as he hauls the door back. The first breath is always the worst. Light floods the entryway and his eyes focus. Despite his best efforts, he cannot heed Denmark's advice. The Dane easily catching him when he pitches forward, coughing and sputtering into his hands. The air is hot and full of grit, and when his vision meets the gray landscape, he can do nothing to stop the sharp breath that flies into him, rushing down into his throat and into his chest, igniting his lungs with a burn that he has not felt since the first waves of the calamity. To his right, he can just barely make out the edge of the fire pit, a ring of greasy, black pitch trailing from its depths to the bunker doors. As he fights to gain his breath back, he tries not to look, tries not to see the footprints in the ash or the pair of crushed eyeglasses by the huge hole in the ground, the last remnants of dead humans. He tries not to think about whom the glasses belonged to or whether the feet that made the prints were still attached to their owners. He tries not to remember the little Polish boy. It's only when Denmark scoops him up and begins to carry him that Peter realizes he's crying. His chest aches, and he buries his face into the front of Denmark's coat, still unable to stop the harsh, racking coughs as the Dane wraps his arms tightly around him and holds him, turning away from the pit and toward the cracked, ash-smothered road. He wants to tell Denmark to put him down. He wants him to acknowledge that he is big enough to not need coddling and that he can take care of himself. But the air hurts, and there are bones in the hole, and he is absolutely terrified. Denmark's gloved hand suddenly comes to rest on the back of his head, gentle and careful, and he presses his cheek to the side of Sealand's head. "Peter," he says softly, turning down enough for the boy to hear him. "It's going to be okay. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I'm going to keep you safe." He hugs him just a little bit tighter, and through the fabric of his windbreaker, Peter can feel him place a steady kiss to his temple. "I promise." And that's the end for the second part to Chapter 3. Have a nice day or night. Night. I said that really. I apologize. But yeah, anyways, have a nice day or night. I'll probably have the next chapter up in it could be a day or it could be an hour, maybe. Depends on how long the next chapter is and when my fam comes home, So have a good day or night wherever you are. Goodbye.